Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to another Fundamentalist Fails. Coming in at the wrong time completely, so I really do apologize for that. It looks like I may have queued this up to start at the wrong time, so I do apologize for that. I absolutely did not mean to put it for that time, but it is at the same time every week, usually. Let me get comments on so everyone can complain at me. Absolutely deserved. Deviant Outcast says, "Is this really true? Do we really trade to an afternoon?" No, that's like midnight. I'm really sorry. I'm maybe I don't think so. I don't think so. I know, Jedi. I'm so sorry, mate. That's entirely my fault, and I will look. I will cop any rude comments you have coming my way. Absolutely. No, that's fair. That is fair. Like I totally get it. I totally get it. I really sincerely apologize. Did not mean to schedule it for what random time I scheduled it for. Maybe I just didn't change the scheduling time. I, it's weird though. It was in StreamYard, which I have a very like you can't put in a thumbnail for StreamYard without scheduling it kind of thing. So that's really weird. It's very, very strange because you would have to schedule it in order to put a thumbnail on it. Does it have like a generic thumbnail? I didn't no, it doesn't, right? It has the right thumbnail. So I don't know what happened there, but again, I really apologize. If it wasn't some problem with StreamYard talking with YouTube, then it's definitely just an error on my part. So I really do apologize. But today we're going to it's another extreme discomfort, and I just love that pun when I'm talking about Ray Comfort because like he is a disquieting kind of man. And I think that it makes me giggle every time I say that. But he's talking about one of my sort of, I mean, it's not a pet subject, but it definitely is a subject that I'm not shy about being very open about, which is capital punishment. Like, I do not support capital punishment in any way, shape, or form. I think that I mean, I'll talk about it, but this was only 2 days ago. It looks like he's got a second channel going, which is sort of a podcast channel. So I do notice that as sort of Ray has gotten older, the amount of um, yeah, I apologize, Jedi. That's it's 3 a.m. I know. How dare I? How dare I? I do apologize though. It was totally set at the wrong time. I will get it right next time. Probably that's not a real guarantee, but I will certainly try my best. That is a real guarantee. I guarantee I will try my best to get it right in all future and subsequent fundamentalist fails. Well, this is atheist fails apparently, so I failed to get the right time. So the reasons why I'll talk about the reasons why I don't support it as I go through, but we have sort of this is what I wanted to sort of talk about was just how odd the way that this panel discusses it, like sort of contrast that with how a panel of sort of um, you know atheists or secularists or people that aren't religious would discuss this thing. Oh, thank you, Jedi. I appreciate it, mate. It's very odd, and I do not miss the irony of his ministry being called Living Waters, right? Like that's it's called Living Waters, and he's advocating for this. But we'll go through and basically, so this is called from a couple of days ago. It's called "Is the penalty biblical?" Right? Like, so is the death penalty biblical? And I think that my first impulse would be, why would we care? Like, why would we care? Like, that would be like saying, well, is the death penalty Quranic, right? Like, does it fit the Quran? Well, why should we care? That obviously was written for, as they like to point out, a people in a completely different place at a different time, and it applied to them. So it's odd seeing when so many of their arguments are kind of, well, that doesn't apply anymore, or we're under a new covenant, or any of these reasons. why they hold on to some of these things so gratuitously. But I'll start this rolling. It isn't a hugely long video, so this might be a shorter one than usual, but I'll start it rolling, and I'd certainly have some stuff to present that may get you thinking again if you are on the sort of death penalty side.
What does the Bible say about the death penalty? It's going to be interesting today to see where we all land, because again,
I don't know who any of these people are. As I've noticed, as Ray gets older, he does less of the walking around on the street and does more of the sitting down podcast, which, I mean, I suppose that's fair enough. Like, we're all getting older. Ray's pretty, I mean, I don't even know when Ray Comfort was born. He must be getting on the older side now. Yeah, he's 75. So I don't think sort of wandering the streets for hours at a time is really, what he wants to do anymore. I think he's sort of gotten sick of that. So he's doing podcast and things like that.
We don't really talk about these things beforehand. You'll see so many people who are for death on one hand, but so against death when it comes to the death penalty.
Okay, so this starting out, so for death against it, then they're not. Okay, so it's sort of a conflation that they're doing. He's basically saying, hey, people that are pro-choice as far as abortion is concerned, they're for death. And it's like, no, they're not. That is a byproduct of being for choice. Like, you're not after the death of anybody really, or anything. You really have just, well, somebody has a right to their body and another person doesn't have a right to use your body, or your organs or your blood cells or any part of your body, even if they need to survive. That's basically it. So it's not like we're going, hey, we want to kill unborn embryos, that we want to go out and do that. No, we want the person to have a choice over the autonomy of their body. So this really is a flagrant straw man of the arguments being presented. On the flip side, you are pro-life, or ostensibly what you call pro-life, but you want to execute people. And it's kind of weird that sort of is the New Testament. They're very quick to say, oh, well, the slavery and stuff, that was Old Testament. We're under a new covenant now. Yeah, no, you got me, Tori. You got me. I do apologize. That was wildly the wrong time. Look, I don't know. I do apologize. Absolutely. That's my fault. It's a Mark Reed fail today, and I failed hard. Big time. Someone make a show about it. But it's really odd to see people that are pro-life. And what happened to under the new covenant? Everyone can be saved. There is no one that is irredeemable, kind of thing. It's very, very strange for them to go, well, here's a horrible person, take him out. It's very, very strange that every time they have something. I know, Tori. I know. I appreciate it though. I really do. Held me to account. I should be held to account. Absolutely. It's very strange for them to sort of say, well, old covenant doesn't apply anymore, except with these things that we want, like 10 commandments, for instance. They go on, we want the 10 commandments in every classroom. Isn't that the old covenant? Isn't that the old covenant? Like, they're so quick to say, hey, that mixed fabric thing doesn't apply. The no shellfish, don't eat shellfish, that doesn't apply. It's old covenant stuff, so we can eat shellfish now. All of these things. But if it's something that they like, they will not give up the Old Testament sort of Mosaic laws. They absolutely will stand by them.
Mark, you've done so much interviewing about the subject of abortion. I'm curious, have you ever asked someone, well, what do you think of the death penalty while asking about abortion?
No, but I've been asked that.
Have you?
Yeah. So somebody will say, you are
Yeah.
against abortion. Yep. The murdering of innocent preborn babies. Yep. How do you feel about the death penalty? Or they just assume that I am for the death penalty. And I say, well, I don't think that that they don't go hand in hand. I think it's apples and oranges. And I think
they don't go hand in hand. like, then you've got to find another description of you to pro-life, because you're basically pro-life until they're born, and have an actual life to lose. Like, while they're a clump of cells, you're like, we've got to protect this thing. But until that, once they're born, they just don't. They're not pro-life anymore. They're sort of pro-capital punishment, and they don't. It's not like they can't hold that position, but it is a bit contradictory. It's very contradictory.
We could have a conversation. But usually when that question comes along from the skeptic, they're not interested in the conversation or the reasoning that I have for being for the death penalty.
Well, it depends what that reasoning is. If your reasoning for the death penalty is, well, it's in my religious text, and so God said it was good. Yeah, that's not a reason that's going to in any way appeal to anybody that doesn't believe in that religious text is some sort of authority. If you've got reasoning based upon solid studies or some kind of empirical data or something that can say, hey, this is not good for society, or it's good for society if we do this, 100% on board. Like, I'm not even joking. If you can actually convince me that it has some sort of benefit, I'm on board. I'm on board, right? Like, there's no problem with it. The problem is that that's not the case, and I do have a lot of evidence lined up about that. So things from Amnesty International has done a lot of work on it. Sort of the Innocence Project has done a lot of work on it. It's not like we're just in a vacuum saying, oh, it's bad because people die and that's it. There's actually been studies done on it. We can reference these studies and find out what's actually happening. Give me one sec. I'll get this lined up, but I'll leave
positioned rightfully that there's sort of a conservative liberal position in regards to the death penalty. But let me take it in-house a little bit and just recognize that this is a tertiary issue, a secondary issue that Christians are divided.
Unless you're the person dying.
Unless you're the person dying. You are very clearly on one side.
Oh yeah, just laugh about it. Yeah, no, it's a very, very. I find this incredibly callous that you have people that are being executed and they're laughing about it like it's some sort of joke. It's not like so. All right. So this is from the Death Penalty Information Center. They've found another 11 cases to the Innocence List, and this is actually done by the Innocence Center, who they basically try to prove cases that are to get them exonerated by DNA and things like that, or false or fabricated concessions. So they've added another one to the list. I believe it is 1,600 people have been executed since the 1970s. So the exoneration of people, it basically means at the moment that we have been, so in the US alone, every 8.3 people going to death row, every 8.3 they find one person innocent later, right? And that may surprise you, that 1 in every 8.3 people are exonerated and did not actually commit the crime they've been accused of, sitting on death row, waiting to be executed. Okay, this is a problem. That's the ones that we found. Okay, it may be higher because people have been executed incorrectly and found out later, whoops, we were wrong. We were absolutely wrong. So how many people innocently executed who were innocent covers, what kind of percentage are we looking at? How many people should we sacrifice who are actually innocent in order to execute people that are guilty? And the problem is with executions, and this should surprise nobody, is there's no way to remedy that. If you have somebody in prison, say they're life without parole, like they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison, you can at least correct that if you've made a miscarriage of justice, right? You can at least correct it and say, hey, we'll let you out and we will compensate you for the miscarriage of justice if it was particularly egregious, sort of you can take action against them. There is things you can do. But when it's an execution, there is nothing you can do. It's done. So we've got this problem where you're talking about the highest penalty, but there's no need for it. There's literally no need for it. And I do want to share with you, I'm not sure if I can share this window. Let's see. Okay, I might have to share it again. This is a PDF, and it's a study done on whether. Why can't I share that? Hello? Share screen, yeah. So it's a study done on identifying challenges to identifying deterrent effects. They provide a recommendation under deterrence and the death penalty. It's the committee found that the more than 30 years later, the primary lesson learned from the latest round of empirical research on the deterrent effect of death penalty is that researchers and policymakers must cope with ambiguity. Explicitly recognizing and accounting for this uncertainty seems like the only move to hope way forward. Basically, there is some strong evidence that the death penalty doesn't actually deter anybody. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to keep talking because it appears like I'm broadcasting. Hold on, I can probably check my stream. I don't know why you're yelling at me, but it seems to be going. Yeah. Oh, read above you. Okay. Relax. Keep in mind that US signed but never ratified the 1989 UN Child Rights Treaty, which includes a ban on executing minors, although this is prohibited under US law. Yeah, fair enough, but you can try a child as an adult kind of thing. No, I got you. It's just NetTube user. Yeah, okay. So that is one of the things that sort of worries me. And another thing that worries me, another thing that really worries me, and I want to get this up. So this is Amnesty's international report on the death penalty around the world. This might be shocking to you. There is only one first world nation that does executions, right? There's only one, and that's the USA. Now you're in sort of like even Mexico and stuff doesn't do executions. This is the thing. So excuse me. There's sort of only one first world nation, and you're in. Yeah, here we go. You're in such wonderful countries as Barbados and there's a whole bunch of them that you wouldn't want to turn up in a list of. Okay, you really wouldn't. Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Belarus, Botswana, China, uh, Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, all of these countries. North Korea is in the list, Pakistan, Nigeria. Singapore, I guess, is a first world country. That is true. I guess that's the only other one. I guess Western first world countries, USA is the only one among them. Yemen, Tunisia, Sudan, Saudi Arabia. There is a Japan as well, I guess, but Japan has very, very few. So 26 in 2024. Now, it did drop under the Biden administration. Trump's administration seems to be bringing it back in force, and this worries me. This really worries me because the Trump administration, I think by now they have proved that they're not particularly good in doing due process. And if you're going to do a death penalty, if you're going to do capital punishment, you need to get the due process right. You need to be absolutely sure that it is as accurate as possible. But how many people are innocent there is a concern. And Big Bad Mama brought up another problem, right? It costs more than a lifetime in prison without parole. Correct. And there's a couple of reasons for that. It's mostly because you've got to follow such a diligent due process, multiple hearings, multiple appeals have to be done. There's a whole load of stuff as someone on death row continues down this process that costs the state a whole bunch of money. Like, it's actually really expensive. You can sacrifice that. You can sort of go, well, we'll stop appeals and we won't do these sort of appeals and lower the costs of it. But that's a trade-off, because if you do that, more innocent people would be executed. It's also incredibly inhumane. There is no, and the whole thing about deterrence, you can say, hey, I'll get to it later, but there is a problem here with the way people think.
But throughout church history, pre-liberalism, Augustine had argued against the death penalty. That doesn't mean that we should be for or against it. The only point that I'm making here is that we as Christians can have charity towards other Christians who are reading the scriptures, thinking critically, and wanting to come to a biblical conclusion whose convictions are falling on a different side of the aisle.
So how are you thinking critically if you're just looking at your religious book and saying, hey, it's right, whatever I get? So I don't know. I think there's some interpretations that are for this on this panel. Like, so even just on this panel, we get a difference in opinion between whether it's right or wrong. But what you'll notice is none of it is based upon thinking critically about the actual subject and saying, hey, is that something that is good for the country? Is it good for society? Is there any problems with it? Have people researched it? You won't hear any of that. Like, when you see this on a secular side, you'll see, hey, we've done research on this. People argue that it seems to deter crime. I don't think it does. I think that people are going to crime no matter what the situation. Like, if somebody does something egregious enough to warrant the death penalty, they're really in a kind of, they're the kind of person it won't dissuade them at all. Like, you talk about the really horrendous people, they're not going to be dissuaded by anything. They are usually, psychopaths or, problems. I will say that the death penalty is against international law. It kind of prohibits it. And there's a reason why, all well, no, not usually. No, not for something that would warrant the death penalty. Usually it is, a sort of, you know, I mean, it's not just somebody commits a crime and they get the death penalty. At least not in America. It has to be sort of a you know, pretty egregious crime kind of thing. Although I did see something on a guy who was convicted of shaken baby syndrome, which apparently is just junk science. It's not really true, and you know, there could have been multiple things. There could have been, you know, it really does seem dubious that it happens.
Hill. This is an area in which we need to think charitably about other Christians. You are right. There's liberal.
Oh, you got to think charitably about other Christians. What if they're not Christian? Fuck them, right? Just yeah. This is always what gets me about sort of the Christian thing is like, well, we've got to think charitably about our Christian brothers and sisters, and it's like, you do know there's other people in society, right? You do know there's atheists out there. I'd like to see the numbers though on atheists that have gotten the death penalty. That would be interesting. So atheists. Let's see. No readily specific, no data apparently. Oh, the Pew Research Center says most atheists and agnostics in the US oppose the death penalty. Let's see. So US adults religiously affiliated favor net. Yeah, of course they do. And white evangelicals, highest of all, because of course so. So I also saw some study from Amnesty International that basically said that, well, I mean, to surprise nobody, black people disproportionately got the death penalty, like way more than white people. But one of the main factors was whether the crime was against white people or not, right? So if it was against white people, there was a much higher likelihood of them getting the death penalty, you know, as opposed to against black people, which, you know, I don't think that's surprising to anybody, but, you know, it's sort of, it's interesting to me that they will sort of say, hey, you know, black people are being affected disproportionately. Well, they're also being ignored when they're the victims of a crime as well, that they're not seen as egregious as crimes against white people, which is horrible. That's absolutely horrible, you know. Canada won't extradite people that might face capital punishment. Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm not sure if Australia does the same. I would be in favor of it if it does. I really would. I really would. That seems like a really good move.
That have a backwards view of arguing against the death penalty, but that shouldn't take away from Christians who are reading the Bibles and struggling to understand the death penalty.
Oscar, I know before we started, you were saying that you're not sure where you land on this. So I'm open to hear. I definitely land on the side personally of that it is right and good and biblical. But I want to hear that out. Where do you guys stand?
Yeah, I'm definitely for the death penalty, but I'm against it. And let me tell you what.
Ray, that makes no sense. I'm for the death penalty, but I'm against it. That makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely no sense whatsoever. Let him explain, but this seems like one of those Ray things where it doesn't make any sense, and you're like, yeah, you could have just said I'm for it and left it at that.
I'm of two minds. Deuteronomy 17:6, whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. You shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. And this is why I'm of two minds. You can see in scripture where there were a lot of false witnesses. Like you've got Jezebel. She got false witnesses to testify against Naboth and had him killed. And that's my concern. I believe in the death penalty, but a lot of people have been put to death who were innocent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's sure you got that from the Bible. Look, I'm impressed that Ray's done some thinking here, like that. Hey, it isn't. Australia does not extradite to capital punishment states. Thanks, Beck. Yeah, I agree. Religious people support death penalty because they believe the executed will face God, be sent to hell, and suffer for eternity. What do I think of that approach? I think it's a terrible approach. It's a terrible approach. It's horrible because you have an innocent person that, you know, oh well, if they die and that, you know, they're innocent, well, then God will just send them to heaven because they haven't done anything wrong. Well, that's assuming that's true. And I might add that, you know, if you're a horrible person being sentenced to death, you can always repent on death row, and there is no punishment for you. That's the immoral thing about the Christian sort of, you know, afterlife justice system. It doesn't matter what you did in life. What matters is if you repent before you die. So there is no punishment for that person. In fact, there's eternal rewards. And so when you're looking at, does the death penalty deter people, right? You know, deter people. If you're religious and you think, well, even if I am caught and get the death penalty, I can just repent and then I'll go to heaven. The deterrence is way less in that thing. So I think it's a sort of, you know, a lurking variable that people forget about. That people believe that, hey, you know, I might be a complete serial unaliver that goes out there and does all this stuff, but Jesus loves me and I can be forgiven and go to heaven. That's built into the system. So I don't think it's a very good thought, because there is no, you know, there's no real justice there as far as I'm concerned. If somebody can just sort of you know, repent, say, you know, I love Jesus, I repent, I believe in Jesus, you know, with the pastor at the end of their term, I don't think that is justice. I think that justice is sort of there to make society a better place. And, you know, the same way that if you know, if you execute a person that is innocent, that isn't justice either. That's a miscarriage of justice. But, you know, I don't believe in a heaven and I don't believe in a hell, so I don't think it really matters. What matters is what they believe. And I know I've met people before that are like, well, I can go out and do almost whatever I want because my sins have been paid for and I'm going to heaven. Really bad for society, you know, that sort of thought that nothing is wrong because you know, the worst that can happen is I go to my eternal reward. Wild, but true.
I took the time to go to Wikipedia, and it just about made me cry.
Yeah.
So many people have been put to death, and afterwards, someone came forward and said, "I did it."
We are talking about people.
Yeah, either that or DNA evidence proves them wrong, or they find out that, hey, some sheriffs, some police officers all lied to get the conviction. A lot of stuff happens. You know, we cannot guarantee that the people being put to death or in prison even are not innocent. That's why we have things like the Innocence Project that works to prove that people are actually innocent. We are fallible. So our systems should reflect that fallibility in our process. It should reflect that there should be a way to provide some sort of correcting mechanism. You know, we can let people out of prison. We can't take back an execution. It's impossible.
People's lives. And I think as Christians, we have to be careful to not just, oh yeah, I think this, I think that. We need to think through this stuff.
Absolutely. In a 2000 interview, John Piper was asked the question about capital punishment, where he stands, and his response was, I am for capital punishment in principle, but how it works out in practice is a totally different issue.
Well, it doesn't matter how it works. Like, it doesn't matter the principle of it. If, you know, it works out in practice is a totally different issue. You can be for it in principle and say, hey, there is no, like, it's like, just say communism, right? It sounds really good in principle, but in practice, it doesn't work. It leads to autocracy. We've seen this time and time and time again. And maybe there is a way that can make it work, kind of thing, but in all the times that it's been implemented, it's quickly turned into a very authoritarian, you know, controlled system. And, you know, any communists in the chat there would say, oh, but you haven't got the right one. Okay, I'm not against it in principle, but if it can't be substantiated in practice, it's not a good idea. And that's the problem with some of these systems, like, anarchy, right? So when I say anarchy, don't get the wrong idea about anarchy. So anarchy, a lot of people misunderstand it. They think it's like a lack of government or a lack of any kind of rules and any kind of oversight. No, that's not what anarchy is. Anarchy as a system is basically a lack of executive, right? The executive branch of the government. So you still have the legislative branch, you still have police, you still have laws, you still have things making laws. What you don't have is the executive branch of, say, the president and the cabinet of secretary of this and secretary of that. Everything is decided through the legislative. Now, that might seem appealing to some people, and in principle, I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. No more executive, no more, centralized power governing and handing out edicts and sort of doing this. But it has problems. Ireland famously ran what was called syndico-anarchism. It basically was that you were part of a syndicate, so you were part of a faction within, and these different factions had different things they wanted to do, and they legislated based upon who had the majority of syndicates supporting it, kind of thing. And at any time, you could just go, okay, well, I don't like that syndicate anymore. I'll join a different one. And then you just move over. It would work. Now, the problems is it's very fragmented. If you want to do something and it's a really, you've got some environmental issue or some kind of, just say there's, I don't know, just say there's bushfires or something, right, in Australia. There's no centralized government to sort of make resources available, send out, in Australia, when bushfires occur, we have emergency services. We have sometimes the army comes out and, helps transport food and resources and assist people, helicopters, that kind of thing. Now, without a centralized government, that becomes very hard. If you have to go through syndicated legislation to do any of that, it becomes very difficult, much less things like defending your country in times of war, for instance. Just say somebody attacks you. It's very slow to react. It's very, very, while it doesn't centralize power, great, it also doesn't respond well to time-sensitive issues. Problem, right? That's a big problem, because sometimes you need a central authority to go, okay, we need to respond to this now, like right now, not, put it up to the syndicates and see. So anarchy in principle is a good system. In practice, it's terrible, because it will never fit into time constrained sort of, time sensitive application, because there is no centralized authority. Well, I think it is because of the strong historical influence of the monarchy. Much like Canada, we're sort of the descendants of people that were, like America. America really, it was founded by people trying to escape the constraints of the monarchy and the constraints of the religious systems of England. So a lot of people came out to America to sort of run from that sort of very authoritarian, the kings have been a mixed bag. Well, it's even worse in Australia, because a lot of us were descended from convicts that were maybe unjustly sentenced to go out to Australia. My family was, or part of my family, like on one side, was definitely unjustly convicted. And I think that the sheer difficulty of surviving in Australia has sort of encouraged a lot of collectivism. You kind of rely on each other, because, if you don't have help, you generally don't survive in Australia. It's a rough place. We have signs on the road saying, last stop for X amount of kilometers, make sure you have water, make sure you have food, make sure you have gas, you know, like it can be rough. It can be rough. So yeah, I think there's a lot, you know, and I think that we have our own things that we've done that are horrendous. Like America has chattel slavery. Yeah, horrendous. Antebellum slavery, horrendous. We've got our own things. A genocide of the Tasmanian Aborigines, horrendous. Horrendous. But I don't see why America can't change as well. I don't know.
Numbers 35:33. You should not pollute the land, right? Blood pollutes the land. No atonement can be made except by the blood of the one who shed it. You know, it's interesting. God is saying that it seems to me, the only justice that can take place is for that person's blood to be shed. And I've heard it worded like this: because I care about you. If somebody were to come inside of our studio right now with a gun,
I'd push easy in the way.
Yeah, so it's weird. It's weird that they're sort of saying, "Hey, blood is the only atonement you can make." Like, oh, hello, Ember. So good to see you. So good to see you, darling. Hey, Nancy. Good to see you. But, you know, this kind of the only atonement can be blood. Well, this is really weird to me because I hear a lot of, well, Jesus paid in blood for your sins, so it doesn't matter anymore. Yet they're sort of saying, well, the only atonement is that person's blood, which is just so ridiculous. You know, I don't see why. I don't see why. It seems like they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to say, hey, any sin can be forgiven because Jesus has paid the ultimate price, but we need to execute these people for their sins or whatever. Like it's wild. And you know, the old covenant of the, you know, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Exodus even, you know, all of those weird laws that were like, you shall not wear mixed thread, or, you know, you shouldn't eat shellfish. That's all abrogated. That's all sort of, you know, there's a new covenant and that makes that thing, except for the death penalty, which we like, which I don't know why. It's so weird that they want, you know, and the 10 Commandments, of course, which they never let up about, even though everything else weird in those books, like Exodus, like the slavery in Exodus, they want to say, oh, well, that doesn't apply anymore, kind of thing, right? And I mean, we're talking about Deuteronomy, which has some really weird stuff in it. Some really weird stuff. I want to share this. This is Deuteronomy 22, right? You know, if you come across a bird's nest by the road, either in tree or in ground, and the mother is sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. You may take the young, but be sure to let the mother go, so it may go well with you, and you may have a long life. Really? That's part of the law? Yeah. For some reason. Do not plow an ox with an ox and a donkey yoked together. Do not wear the clothes of wool and linen woven together. Yeah, so that's the mixed thread thing that it talks about. And make tassels on 4 corners of the cloaks you wear. I want to ask them, do they make tassels on the 4 cloaks? On the 4 corners of the cloaks that well, they're not wearing cloaks. So how does that work? And this is wild, right? If a man takes a wife and after sleeping with her dislikes her and slanders her, gives her a bad name, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I did not find proof of her virginity. So it's always this, well, the woman has to be a virgin at their wedding kind of thing. Then a young woman's father and mother shall bring to the town elders at the gate proof she was a virgin. I'm not sure how they do that. Maybe it's the I'm not sure how they do that. Like, it doesn't specify how they do that. What constitutes proof that she's a virgin? I mean, what are we talking about here? You know, at first I thought, hey, it's probably like the bed sheet or something if there's a little bit of blood, but no, that would be the new the husbands. This is the young woman's father and mother that have given her to somebody else. I don't know like, what would be proof? Testimony? Do they line a bunch of witnesses up of the people that didn't sleep with her? I don't know what the hell. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Now, he has slandered her. I did not find your daughter to be a virgin, but here is the proof of my daughter's virginity. Which is what exactly? Then her parents shall display the cloth before the elders of the town. So it's obviously the cloth, and the elders shall take the man and punish him. They shall fine him 100 shekels of silver and give them to the young woman's father, because this man has given an Israelite virgin a bad name. She shall continue to be his wife. He must not divorce her as long as he lives. Well, that's one way to get a man for life. If, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, I mean, you're really talking about taking bed sheets off. Anyway, wild. She shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of her town shall stone her to death. She has done an outrageous thing in Israel for being promiscuous while still in her father's house. You must purge the evil from among you. Really? This is the book that you're getting your legal basis of the capital punishment from. This is what you're reading. Here we go. But out in the country, if a man happens to meet a young woman pledged to be married and rapes her, only the man who have done this shall die. Do nothing to the woman. She has committed no sin deserving death. This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbor. For the man found the young woman out in the country, and though the betrothed woman screams, there was no one to rescue her. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. Yeah, so if you find a virgin girl out in the wilderness and you do unspeakable things to her, your punishment is getting her as a wife. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. But if that girl, sleeps with somebody before they're married, she's put to death. It is absolutely abhorrent. And I don't know why you'd be going to that book for your legal instruction. Like, seriously, why are we even talking about it?
The most loving thing I can do for you guys is to try to take him out, right? John 15:13. There's no greater love than this, than one to lay down his life for his friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a start, that says there's no greater love than laying down your life for your friends. Okay, that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about laying down somebody else's life in self-defense. And look, I got no problem with self-defense kind of thing. If you're in the moment and, you think somebody's going to be killed and you defend them and end up, killing somebody, I get that. That should be a clear case of self-defense or defense of others. Yes, I totally get it. But that's not what we're talking about. And the fact that they have to go to, well, if a gunman storms in and I take him out somehow, then that says that the death penalty should be. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about state-sanctioned legal implementation of execution. That is not what we're talking about here. And the fact that they're sort of conflating with this self-defense thing, stop. Like, seriously, why can't they talk about the actual subject?
So if I were to somehow take him out, now obviously, what is the best way to be able to take it out? I don't want to kill someone. Nobody wants to kill anyone. Nobody wants that. But the most loving thing that you can do for a society is to protect a society against an individual.
Let me just say this. What's significant about Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for he's in the image of God. He made man. The significance, I think, of this verse, and to me, what's convincing, as it relates to the death penalty is that this is pre-law. Because sometimes, we'll cite verses that are within the law, and we understand that the ceremonial, the civil, sacrificial systems of the law, like those don't apply to us anymore. But
no, Genesis wasn't pre-law. So Genesis was, I mean, I'm not sure why. So Genesis 9:6. I guess you could sort of say that if there. So generally, when people talk about things like Deuteronomy, it really is a summation of all the laws that have been. Like, so Exodus came out, it had all of this. It sort of rambled a bit. Leviticus rambled, like it had all this stuff. Deuteronomy is sort of the second law. It sort of sums up all of the things. In Exodus, which definitely, Exodus is the 10 Commandments. It's definitely not pre-law. It has that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing. So I don't know. He's sort of saying, whoever sheds the blood of man by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. That's not even necessarily capital punishment, but it is sort of reiterated in the Bible as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that kind of thing. I'll get the actual passage. Yeah, so it appears in both Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Whoever takes Leviticus, whoever takes a human life shall surely be put to death. Whoever takes an animal's life shall make it good, life for life. So it kind of does say that in Leviticus and Exodus and Deuteronomy, which sort of, saying this is pre-law. Well, kind of, yeah. But why would, if it's expressed as well later on, what does that matter? I don't understand his point.
This is pre-law. Because sometimes, we'll cite verses that are within the law, and we understand that the ceremonial, the civil, sacrificial systems of the law, like those don't apply to us anymore. But in the New Testament, makes me think, okay, well, this aligns with that. Romans 13:1-4, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. The authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves.
Okay, so that's really weird to hear them sort of say this, because it doesn't really say whether the death penalty is applicable or not. It just says that there is no authority except from God. All the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Really? So if there's a horrible dictator in charge, that was appointed by God. Who knew Obama was appointed by God? Who knew? This is very strange. That sort of suggests that the Ayatollah in Iran was appointed by God. Maybe he's not a Christian God. I don't know. It's very, very strange. Why would God put the Ayatollah in Iran in power? It's very strange. Why would that sort of message sort of says, well, God is responsible for Hitler, because if he was an authority in Germany and the authorities that exist are appointed by God, that means Hitler was appointed by God. I'm sorry to do Godwin's law, but that's what it suggests to me. No matter how vile, ruthless, and horrible somebody is, God put him there. Why? Why would you do that?
For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain.
Right.
For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. So those two passages for me are the strongest texts in Scripture to say, look, this is what God said pre-law, and then this is what the New Testament says about the governing authorities that don't bear the sword in vain, and they execute wrath, vengeance from God on evildoers.
Really? So of all the countries doing capital punishment, you think that the authorities are, so in Saudi Arabia where they executed Christians before. Like, you think that's the judgment of God, in wrath? Of course they don't. Yeah, much love, Ember. Much love. I also got to do the next debate review will be on my channel, and I'm always really unorganized about doing it. So Ember puts up with me, and that's incredible. Like, it really is incredible that she can put up with me that much. So that's amazing. I'm more amazed at that she can put up with my complete lack of organization, ADHD, and general dysfunction, quite frankly.
So Mark,
Right.
do you, because I didn't ask for your position, you stand kind of with Ray on that in terms
Yeah.
of like, yes, but we have to be really careful.
Yeah, we need to be very, very careful, right? And so, I mean, I did say earlier that I'm for the death penalty because it's good for a society to.
How is it good for society? This is what I want to know. Like, I don't know how it's good for society. I can get that, sort of saying, hey, it allows the families of those people that have been wronged to get over it. But I don't think it really, I don't think it really addresses that. And a lot of people experience regret after it happens, that it doesn't actually, help their grieving at all. That it doesn't bring people back. They think that it's going to make them feel better, but nothing will make them feel better once they've lost, a loved one. Oh yeah, Jess, apparently you were like 12 hours late because I scheduled this at some random time. Thing. If we agree that many religious worldviews no longer align with modern knowledge, then why rely on thousands of quotes of ancient belief systems that no longer reflect today's humanity? I don't know. I don't. I rely on modern science to interpret it. Like, I understand. I don't do presentism. I don't say, hey, those people are horrible for practicing the death penalty. They didn't know anything about, well, anything really. They had practices that were uninformed by how modern societies work, because modern societies, if we just went around doing that, an eye for an eye, everybody would be blind. Because what would happen when you have an eye for an eye justice, when you have this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, somebody thinks somebody poked out an eye. So they poke out somebody else's. But oops, they were wrong. So they get to poke out somebody else's, and they think that they're wrong for doing so. And then everyone's blind. It's a terrible, terrible system. You have to have some sort of system that you can go, okay, well, we have a standard for justice. We have a standard for finding them guilty. We have a process for them to show they're innocent. And I might add, a presumption of innocence. They have to be shown to be guilty rather than just, assume they're guilty and then they have to prove their innocence, like the virgin in the book that we just read about, who had, their parents have to prove that she's innocent rather than she's presumed to be innocent, and the guy has to prove that she's guilty, right? So even on that horrible example, it's still not in alignment with what we ought to do as far as justice is concerned. So yeah, I totally agree. I don't know why people would go to ancient belief systems. It makes no sense whatsoever. And Jedi, for $5, when you speak in an echo chamber, the only message you hear is the sound of your own voice. Yeah. I mean, I guess one person said, oh, I'm on the fence about it in this one. So I at least give them that not everybody agrees with it. I don't know. I don't know, Jedi. I think that there is a problem with that. And I think that there's too much of, well, if it was against God's will, it wouldn't happen. If it was against God's will, he wouldn't be executed. I don't see evidence of God intervening in any way to make anything happening whatsoever. Like this whole assertion that God has, is the authority behind all of these people in charge. To me, it sounds like sort of, first century propaganda. It sounds like, hey, just obey who's in charge because God put him there. It seems like the foundation for feudalism, where your place was appointed by God, and the nobles and aristocracy and the priests had their place, and they're all appointed by God, and you peasants were put there by God. So don't get ideas above your station. It really does sound like a beginning to that aristocracy.
Remove plagues. John Calvin, he said the execution of the law is not cruelty, but mercy to the community. And that's what I'm talking about. There's a mercy and a grace to the community.
Okay, so John Calvin was a bit of a weirdo. John Calvin, but a mercy to the community. Well, I mean, if you can make some sort of argument about why it's good for the community, I will certainly listen. I will certainly listen to that. But I don't hear many arguments about why it's good for the community, because generally it's not. We can do the same thing that executions can provide by just life without parole. Like, there's no problem with doing that.
By getting rid of that person who is a scar to that community.
Right.
You can resort now, devil's advocate, then just put them away. Remove them from a society. Well, I don't think that, once again, lines up with what we're seeing here inside the New Testament. Sproul, he said, capital punishment is not simply a matter of retribution. It is a matter of honoring the sanctity of life.
But if you get the same results by locking up someone up, life without parole, right? They're not, you're basically saying, hey, we got to remove them from the community. Sure. Life without parole does that. If you're sort of saying, hey, it's honoring the sanctity of life. Well, sanctity of life would include somebody who's innocent's life, wouldn't it? And we do put people on death row who are actually innocent. It happens. So what percentage of people do you condone being improperly convicted of the death penalty? How many innocent people should we put up with? At the moment, they estimate it's about every 8.3 people going on the death row, one person is exonerated from DNA evidence, or pointing out improper things in the trial or something like that. Like, what ratio do we say this is okay? Really, I really want to know what's acceptable to you. Is it 10 to 1? Is it 20 to 1? Is one too many? Because I personally believe that one innocent person dying improperly is one too many. But these people don't seem to think so. And I want to know where their limit is. If it's 2 for 1, is that too many, or is that acceptable? I don't know, because I think that even if one person is executed improperly, where we would be able to at least, even if they were life without parole, yes, it might be a decade, 2 decades, we can at least let them out at that point and say, we're terribly sorry, a miscarriage of justice has occurred. Compensate them. They have some sort of life. They have something. With executions, what are you going to do? You have to say, well, they'll get into heaven. Not enough.
We are honoring the beauty of life by removing lives that are trying to destroy innocent human lives.
There is that aspect of it as well. Like, a lot.
Well, we can do that with life without parole. We can do that by locking people, and locking people up is actually cheaper than the death penalty. As Big Bad Mama pointed out, it's actually cheaper because the death penalty has so many appeals, so many sort of hoops to jump through, and we can just sit them in a cell for the rest of their life, and it will actually be cheaper on the state. So the big question is, why do this? Why? Yeah, Nancy, I'm absolutely with you. I'm absolutely with you. And as I've pointed out, more states since the Trump regime has come in have started up the death penalty again. And federally, they've started up the death penalty again, where they weren't doing federal capital punishment under Biden. Trump does not seem big on due process. If anything we've seen from the ICE raids, he does not seem big on due process. So that is definitely worrying, absolutely worrying.
A lot of times when people aren't put to death, on the flip side, where justice isn't done, they end up getting paroled. They end up getting released when they took someone's life, and then they do it again. We never talk about that aspect of it. Those that are released and go out and do it again.
Yes, but their crimes that they got paroled for weren't the crimes that they were put on death row for, right? So your basis isn't correct here, because we're not talking about instead of death row they get paroled. We're talking about life without parole instead. Okay, so he's conflating someone that's committed sort of a crime, served this sentence, got parole, and is let out. Well, the death penalty wouldn't fix that, because if they didn't get the death penalty in the first place, they would still be let out under parole. This is nonsense. This is basically going, and if your answer is, hey, have the death penalty for even, any crime, any serious crime whatsoever, that's horrifying, because a lot of people are convicted unjustly for major crimes. They are. So I don't know what he's suggesting, because if your replacement for the death penalty is life without parole, then that's not going to happen. He's not going to get out. He's not going to be paroled. So this is just a distraction. This isn't something that can be taken seriously, unless he's saying that, hey, even if you commit grand theft auto or, a manslaughter, you accidentally kill, then they should get the death penalty for that. In that case, wow, you're going to have to really expand that system there.
A lot to it. Ray, you went out on the streets and asked people about this, actually, specifically.
Yeah, and I was very, very surprised. Well, not surprised, but so many young people against the death penalty, like gritted teeth against it. Until I asked them,
pro-choice.
What's that? Yeah, they're pro-choice. The same. But when I asked them this question, if your mother was viciously and stabbed to death, do you think the murderer should be put to death? And they immediately said yes.
Oh, wow.
I've got a funny feeling that's not what they said. If they're against the death penalty, they probably said, like, would you kill somebody if it was to save your mother from being stabbed? I don't have that readily available. I couldn't find it, so I don't know. But Ray's got a way of spinning things, and I don't think somebody who is vehemently opposed to the death penalty would say, oh, except if it was my family. Generally you will say, well, if and this is something that came up in my last debate, actually. Essentially somebody said, oh, if your family was being violated in front of you, wouldn't you want them to be killed? And I'm like, well, no. And he's like, well, then you'd just stand and watch. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Like, he's conflating. And I suspect that Ray's doing the same. I don't have evidence of this, but I suspect he's doing the same, because he asked some very loaded and some very manipulative and deceptive questions when he's out on the street doing his discomfort thing. He kind of, this whole idea that, hey, would you terminate somebody who is actually attacking your family in the moment? Yes. I would do everything to stop them. If I had to, I would end them in order to stop them from doing that. But if you're talking about if it happened and then later you wanted the death penalty, no, I don't support the death penalty. But we're talking later on when they've been arrested for a heinous crime. And I think Ray's doing the same conflation here, basically asking people, oh, do you support the death penalty? No, we're against the death penalty. Oh, would you, possibly kill somebody if they were attacking your family? Well, yes, we would defend our family even if it meant killing the perpetrator. Well, that's not the same thing. But Ray's going, oh, but they would support the death penalty then. That's not the death penalty. That's not the death penalty. So I think that's what he's doing.
There's a man in California jail. He's the most convicted man in U.S. history, prolific serial killer. His name is Samuel Little. He's confessed to 93 murders. And the FBI crime analysis believe all his confessions are credible. Law enforcement has been able to verify 50 of those confessions, many more pending final confirmation. Little says he strangled 93 victims between 1970 and 2005. He killed 93. This is where the death sentence works. If you put a man to death because he strangled one woman, he's not going to do it again.
Yeah.
And he's done it again and again. 93 people murdered because California doesn't have any guts.
Yeah, so I must point out, though, Ray, I don't think that's what he originally was arrested for. What was his name? Something Little?
Who put a man to death? Because when I asked them this question, if your mother was death, do you think the murderer should be put to death? And they immediately said yes.
Oh, wow.
There's a man in California jail. He's the most convicted man in U.S. history, prolific serial killer. His name is Samuel Little.
Samuel Little. Okay. So I don't think this guy's original crime was strangling a woman, right? Like he got arrested for other stuff. Yeah, the FBI has confirmed at least 60. I mean, he was convicted of 8, but he confessed to 93, right? Like, so it wasn't like they knew about all of them. That's the thing. Yeah, so he was sentenced to 3 years for breaking into a furniture store. You know, he was arrested in Mississippi for a murder, extradited to Florida. Prosecution witnesses identified Little as a court person who had spent the time with Mountain on the night before her disappearance. Due to mistrust of witness testimonies, Little was acquitted. So he was acquitted for that one. He was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling. 1 month later, he was found by police in the backseat of a car with an unconscious woman. Little served 2.5 years in prison for both crimes. Yeah, I don't know why. Like, I get that, hey, there should be greater charges for people like this. I get you. But life without parole would have done the same thing. Like, this is just an appeal to emotion. It's sort of a, hey, this person's really bad. Shouldn't he get the death penalty and that would stop all the other ones? Well, no. Because for those ones, like, the death penalty wasn't on the table. Like, life without parole would have done exactly the same thing. You know, he would be in jail and unable to do any of that stuff. I don't understand why you need the death penalty specifically for that. Why it would have any more effect than just locking them up for the rest of their life, which is cheaper, I might add. Actually cheaper. I don't get it. On September 25, 2014, he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Well, I mean, you know, 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Yeah, he's not doing this. And I mean, he died in 2020, aged 80. Like, he died in prison. Once he'd been convicted of life without possibility of parole, he'd never got out of prison. He died there. So I don't know why you would say, hey, if he'd been, you know, given the death penalty, it would have been better. As soon as he was convicted with life without possibility of parole, he didn't do anything. He stayed in prison. Wild.
He's confessed to 93 murders. And the FBI crime analysis believe all his confessions are credible. Law enforcement has been able to verify 50 of those confessions, many more pending final confirmation. Little says he strangled 93 victims between 1970 and 2005. He killed 93. This is where the death sentence works. If you put a man to death because he strangled one woman, he's not going to do it again.
Yeah.
And he's done it again and again. 93 people.
Yes, but if you put a man in prison who strangles one woman for the rest of his life, he's not going to do it again as well, Ray. So what now? Like, what's your point? It's not something for the death penalty. Like it's just saying, hey, harsher prison sentences, okay. Harsher sentencing laws, okay.
Murdered because California doesn't have any guts
Wow.
to stand up for that which is right.
Spurgeon said, a community that fosters mercy without justice encourages sin.
Well, what about honor?
Encourages mercy without justice, encourages sin. Really? Wow.
Honoring the dignity, the image-bearing quality of the victim.
Mm.
But C.S. Lewis takes it a step further. He says
Ugh.
just punishment is actually honoring the image-bearing quality of the person committing the crime, recognizing their need for moral obligation and responsibility. In other words, he points out that like you are honoring the image-bearing quality in the perpetrator by holding them accountable in this kind of way, which is
that is so silly. But are you still honoring it if you execute a wrongly convicted person? What did C.S. Lewis have to say about that? Oh, he doesn't. He doesn't have anything to say about that. You know, that's God working in mysterious ways. That's what that is. You know, it always baffles me the way that they talk this way, having not had a miscarriage of justice against themselves. You know, never been convicted of something wrongly themselves. It really is wild.
a fascinating argument.
Okay, as a Christian, I think Christians should be going to those on death row and preaching the gospel to them, you know, that they get saved and get right with God. But that doesn't mean that
That's
they're,
exactly what we do
yeah,
every day.
amen.
We witness to people who are on death row. Everybody's waiting to die because God's proclaimed the death sentence upon them. Yeah, some people point to Jesus and
Everyone's waiting to die because God has proclaimed the death sentence upon them. I feel like this is just Ray preying on people who are desperate. You know, they're being executed and they're desperate. I don't wonder now why Ray wants more executions. You know, like he really is preying on people who are desperate at the end of their lives. I mean, you know, wow. Jessica says, how is one meant to carry forth one's responsibility to society if one is, you know, dead? Well, I mean, I suppose that is, you know, your responsibility to society is to leave it if you cannot work within it, kind of thing, I guess. But, you know, that's not your choice at that point. It's very weird. It's very strange. And it kind of, I do note, Jess, that it conflicts with the idea that everyone's redeemable, kind of thing. I suppose everyone's redeemable after, you know, except people that you decide aren't, I guess. It's weird.
say he was against the death sentence because the woman caught in adultery was going to be put to death, and he stopped it. But what we don't realize is he was on his way to Jerusalem to be executed on her behalf. And then Jesus told us, he that's without sin, let him cast the first stone at her. And if there's anyone that could have cast a stone at her, it was Jesus, because he was without sin. But the reference, I think, is to the fact that there's a stone coming to all of humanity. Jesus said, whoever falls upon the stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever the stone shall fall, it shall grind into powder. Speaking of the wrath of the Lord that's going to come. And when you grind something to powder, you do a thorough job. There's nothing left. And God's justice is going to be thorough on that day, right down to the thoughts and intents of the heart.
I think, guys, to sum it up,
you know, and appealing to some, you know, ultimate justice after you die, it just, all it is just a mental salve to make themselves feel better. Well, you know, kill them all and then God will sort them out. It's awful. It's absolutely awful, because I don't think there is any justice coming at, you know, why does a, you know, convicted serial killer get to repent on their deathbed and go to heaven, while somebody that's an atheist that has lived all of their life trying to help people, they're the ones to go to hell? That doesn't seem like justice to me. That seems like, you know, human tribalism to me.
it's crucial that there is care involved in this. You do have those clear-cut cases where there's no question, even the murderer confesses. I mean, imagine in California, a murderer confesses to being a serial killer, and then we still won't put him to death. I mean, there's no fear there that there could be a mistake. He's admitting it. We have forensic evidence that is unquestionable. They still won't do it. The good points.
Yeah, the problem there is that police have extricated false confessions from people before. They're very, very good at getting confessions. The problem is they sometimes get confessions when the person didn't even do it. Like you see people interviewed who are sort of, you know, they're sitting there going, after, you know, hours and hours, 8 hours of interrogation, they've said, you start to think, am I wrong and I did do it? Especially as the police come in. And an interesting thing about police interrogations is there is no requirement for them to tell you the truth, right? There is no requirement for them to tell you the truth. So when they come in and they say, hey, we found your DNA at the scene, that may not be true, right? And you're going, what? How could you possibly find my DNA at the scene? That's impossible. Well, we found it. You've got to explain it. They can do that. They're allowed to lie to you completely. And people that have been in these incredibly long interviews, even though they're innocent, they're like, well, did I do it or not? Like, it really does a number on your mind. It really does a number on your mind. And, I personally, I would never speak to the police for any kind of interview or any kind of discussion without having a lawyer present. The reason why, for me, the big reason why is because I am on the autism spectrum, and that can be interpreted a lot of ways that is bad, right? I think that, when it comes to that, like, there have been people who the police, the baby shaking one that I mentioned earlier, that they're trying to get him off death row. Basically, they said, they told him that his daughter was dead, and he didn't seem to have much of a reaction. Well, since then, he's been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. And even though you may not see a relayed reaction from the person on the spectrum, they still do feel it. So it's things like this that the police go, well, that's our suspect. Take him in. They lie to them. And being on the autism spectrum, we have a tendency to believe things that we're told. You can get into a lot of trouble. So I don't do interviews with police unless my lawyer is present. Now, in Western Australia, there's 3 things we have to give them. We have to give your name, your address, and your date of birth. And that's all. And that's all that I provide, just because people can get especially police can get a wrong impression of somebody who is on the spectrum. And Deviant, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I noticed you dropped by at the wrong time. Well, it was the right time according to lying YouTube, but I'm sorry.
That we've covered are the fact that this is honoring the dignity and value of that person. May the Lord help us to continue to examine this.
Really? How about an innocent person that gets executed? Could we know that's happened before and is exonerated via DNA evidence, or, showing that testimony from police or other eyewitnesses was unreliable? So how do you feel about that for the dignity of the person? Is that dignified? Oh, no, we're not going to talk about that. No, absolutely not. No. I think, have I ever been? I've never been interviewed by the police. I had them approach me on the road kind of thing, but not like just ask me a couple of questions kind of stuff, but not sort of interviewed, no.
Scriptures, to think through these things, to talk about them, to discuss them, and again, to fall back ultimately on what the designer of man has said is best.
This video is part of the Living Waters podcast. To watch full episodes and explore.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would. And hilariously, this is from Living Waters. Yes, Living Waters for death penalty. Yep. Oh, thanks, Deviant. That's so sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, so Living Waters, all for death. And this is the thing. I don't mind if they have some sort of arguments for why it's good for society. They're sort of saying, hey, honoring this person by unaliving them. Well, no, it's not good for society. Like I said, a lot of people that want the death penalty for those that have transgressed against them find out it's not the satisfying thing that they thought it would be. The movies kind of depict it in, this is going to be a a satisfying way, and it's not at most of the time, because that person is gone and it's a terrible tragedy. And yes, if somebody is a danger to society, they absolutely need to be removed from it. Like, I'm certainly not questioning that. I absolutely think so. Like, if you are a danger to society, society needs to do something about it. But there's no reason that has to be the death penalty. There's no reason, and there's a lot of reasons why it's a bad idea. There's a lot of reasons why it is a bad idea. One of which is that you get innocent people caught up in it, despite our best efforts. And we do, like, don't get me wrong, the USA does do a lot of due process to make sure that innocent people aren't caught up in it, right? Like, it's just, the problem is that we are fallible, and they always do. They always do. Secondly, it costs a lot more because of that due process. Now, it worries me that the current administration doesn't care for due process, that thinks that they can do stuff unilaterally without any kind of legal obligations or legal consequences for what they're doing. They just do it, which is wild and crazy. And, I hope some consequences are coming soon, because I don't see them eventuating that much, and it's worrying that they can violate the law so flagrantly and the Constitution so flagrantly, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of pushback. I mean, Congress should be the one pushing back. Congress should be the one holding them accountable for not following the laws that the legislative body has laid down. They should be holding the executive to those laws, because if they don't, they're just sacrificing their own ability to make legislation that is universal across the country. That even the executive branch has to follow the laws that the legislative branch establishes. And they're just tossing it away, and I don't know why. Probably because Republicans think Trump's the second coming. But I don't know. It's just there doesn't seem to be a lot of consequences coming, which is worrying. Because if we start to drop due process on the death penalty, it's going to get worse. Don't forget, every 8.3 people that is sent to the death row, one is innocent in the USA. That is the problem. And yeah, you can probably bring that down by putting them through more process and, checking whether they do deserve to be there. But again, that's more expensive. And it's already more expensive than life without parole. Life without parole accomplishes the same end. They can't get out to do any more crime. They're basically taken away from society. They can't influence society. Everything that the death penalty can accomplish is already accomplished by life without parole. I don't understand why you need it if it's more expensive. Some people argue that it has a deterring effect. Other studies have shown that it doesn't seem to deter people. The people that commit the kind of crimes that would get them on death row will do it regardless if there's a death penalty or not. Somebody who is talking about that, Samuel Little, for instance, who, strangled those people. Even the death penalty is not going to deter someone that sick from doing that. Unfortunately, I wish it would. It doesn't seem to. So it doesn't seem to provide a deterrent. It doesn't seem to help society in any way. It's more expensive. It's inhumane. I mean, that's one I haven't talked about. It's inhumane. The chemical executions that they were doing caused incredible pain throughout the people experiencing it. And there was botched executions. Now they're doing nitrous suffocation. I can't imagine that's more humane. Like, seriously, I don't think there is a humane way to execute somebody. Maybe, but that's incredibly expensive as well. So, I really think it's time for a a first world nation, especially a first world Western nation, to just put this behind us and say, hey, we've got a prison system able to cope with these people and remove them from society so that society isn't affected. I think it's possible, but anyway, that was our fundamentalist fails. I'm sorry, it was just kind of short one, but I will say I am absolutely against the death penalty. I don't think it has any good reason to exist at all. None whatsoever. I've heard the arguments, I've been in debates about it. There is no good reason to have it besides this sort of an emotional idea of, well, if I get sort of, a person's been killed, if I execute their perpetrator, then it's justice. That's not justice. That's vengeance. It's a very, very, very different thing. Do I support the death metal penalty? Look, that sounds like cruel and unusual punishment to me. Depending on which band it is, okay. Anyway, thank you. If Australia strives as a secular democracy, they're keeping a symbol and a role of tradition in a rational society. Oh, look, I'm not a monarchist. Most people over here aren't. We live in a constitutional monarchy. So basically, they keep figureheads of the king and queen and stuff, whoever's in the person. I think it's outdated and flawed. I think that our constitution is terrible and it needs a rewrite, to be honest with you. I think our constitution is absolutely shockingly bad. I've said it before. I think that tradition without any validity is pointless. I don't see why we're doing it. I have no idea. But it seems to be in Australia that we will allow the king and the queen to be king and queen as long as they don't do anything. Like, as long as they do absolutely nothing, they're fine. So a lot of Australian everyday sort of implementation of law, there's a saying over here, and that's convention is stronger than law, right? So how Australians do stuff is stronger than the rule of law. It's very strange, but it kind of works. Like, people will get upset if something transgresses their expectations. So yeah. But yeah, I think our constitution is one of the worst in the world. I think, like, the US Constitution, for all of its flaws, it's an amazing document. It's an incredible document. It outlines certain things that are absolutely fantastic. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom from religion or of religion. All of these things that have been enshrined in it are very, very good. It's just, some of them I disagree with. Second Amendment sucks, like, it's a terrible amendment. But our constitution is absolutely tragically bad. So I think it needs a rewrite. I don't know who I'd appeal to for that, but absolutely think that our constitution is an absolute shocker. Just a shocker. Like, for instance, our prime minister isn't in our constitution, right? Like, it isn't in our constitution. The prime minister, or any of the cabinet members that sort of run the cabinet, so Minister for Health and Minister for Education and all of this, they're not in it, which is wild, right? That's wild. I don't know. All right, well, do take care, everybody. As always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Like, understand that people are convicted wrongly. It happens. We can't, I don't think we can even allow one just to sate a emotional need to punish those people. And don't forget that in America, whether you get on death row or not is largely whether the crime was against a black person or a white person. you have a way higher chance of being on death row if your crime was against a white person. That should not be the way it is. Absolutely not. So take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.